of that. I'm actually going to start with the wing, and I am going to, so here's my palette. I'm going to just wet some stuff and see what I got that I can turn into what I think is the lightest color on that wing, because it is not white. So I'm going to take a little bit more of my burnt sienna. And I already had kind of like a browny gray. I think I might have mixed that with, oh, what did I mix that with? Could have mixed that with a little bit of a shadow gray, which is this color right here. You can get this color pretty similar by mixing ultramarine and burnt sienna. If it doesn't look, if it looks still too tawny, too burnt sienna, not enough. If it needs more of a pink cast, you can always add like a cold red in there. I'm actually seeing it as more of an orangey color, so I'm just actually going to test right here and see if I like that. I actually do. I think that's good enough. All right. So I'm going to do a technique that I rarely use. I am going to, well, no, this one I do use. This, it is kind of a wet and wet, but not really a wet and wet. I'm not going to put water everywhere on this wing. So you'll see the shine on it. It's not everywhere. I have a pretty watery mix of paint, which I will want to keep pretty watery, because I'm going to use the water I put down and kind of move it over here into the dry areas. I do this because I have more control. If I were just to lay water down everywhere, I would literally be fighting that it would go into areas that I don't want it to go in. Watercolor will follow water. If I put water way up to the edge, I run the risk that it goes beyond where I want it in the wing. So you might ask, well, why didn't you just work wet on dry? Because it's a big area and I don't want too many streaks. So by laying some water down and then working watery paint into the drier areas and pulling it down, I minimize the amount of streaks that I'm going to get. The reason why we're doing this first is we want this to dry first. Okay, so I'm gonna, to that mix, because everything mixes together on my palette, I'm gonna pick up some of the burnt sienna that I already had, and I'm gonna add it to that watery mix. Maybe a little more. This is why I keep my palette dirty, because I don't use any other colors than these. I don't pick other colors up. I worked a very long time, years, to get this palette exactly the way I want it for the subject matter that I use it for. And I'm not somebody who's like, ooh, new color, I'm going to put that into my palette. Nope. And that way, these all, I know that they all mix together and how they react when they mix together, which is why I keep a dirty palette. And that way I don't waste any paint either. Okay, so I'm just going to test out in the corners. Yeah, I like that one too. So here, I just watered it down a little bit more. Here I am going to work wet into dry. So remember how we had that little piece that was a little darker? I'm using the point of my brush to kind of go up. Now, that's too wet. So all I need to do is blot my brush. The brush acts as a sponge, and now I've got some stuff to use elsewhere. So I'm just kind of doing little lines, kind of avoiding this right now. I'm just going to leave it like that. And then I'm blotting my brush even more. So now I have a lighter color, and I'm going to just kind of put little lines in and go up into that pen mark that I had. I'm avoiding pretty much the white area, but I am kind of going around. So I can kind of see this perimeter that I got going here of white feathers. Okay. I might put some right here too. Okay. Now I can use a slightly darker version of that red. So here I go. I had some brown, which was basically French ultramarine or ultramarine and burnt sienna mixed together. And I think I'm going to add a little bit more. This is like a tried and true. I keep another brown on my palette too, which is this one, which is ultramarine and not burnt sienna, but quinacridone burnt orange, which is a slightly brighter mix, so it creates a slightly greener or yellower brown. I'll just mix that in there. Let's not waste anything. But that way I can go either way, temperature-wise. I actually want this to be a little cooler and a little bluer, so I'm going to add more blue. And maybe even a little more blue. Ultramarine is pretty powerful. So I think I'll just stay to that side. See, now I've gone a little bit too gray. It's starting to turn black, so let's add a little bit more of this. And I am seeing like a little bit of a purple in there. Now I can go for a purple, or I can pick up what is my alizarin crimson dupe, which is anthraquinoid red, because I have plenty of French ultramarine in here. It's going to kind of purple it up without making it purple. My purple's really, there we go, sweet spot. My purple's really powerful, so that might be a little overkill. So there we go. All right. Because I know I have a lot of water, I'm using a brush that it's a quill that holds a lot of water. This is still wet, but not too gloppy. I'm just going to kind of go in to the darkest areas. I'm using the tip of my brush. So if you are using a round, which I hope you are, rounds are very useful, use only the tip. Hold it on the edge, use the tip. Or if you have a smaller brush, use a smaller brush. All right, I want that pretty dark in there. And I want it pretty dark in here too. All right, we're going to let that dry a little bit. This is still too wet to work on, so let's move into the white. And I'm actually going to switch to a smaller brush. Let's see, let's go for a number 3. So I have a number 3 spotter, which is like a round, it's just shorter and fatter. So here's where you want to mix up a gray, and this is like going to be an exercise in limited palette here. So let me find a, yeah, I'll just put it right there because I already had some of this on there. So we want a gray color. What I had on already here was chromatic black, which is basically phthalo green mixed with anthraquinoid red. I make my own mix. But I do want it a little warmer, so we're going to pick up some of this and put it in there. And I want it watered down, like a lot. All right, let's give it a shot here. All right, so I'm going to just test it Could do with a little bit more water. Actually, a lot more water. Okay, let's test it. Yeah, perfect. All right, so we'll go more into this. I'm kind of foreshadowing. So after starting in September, I am going to start a very in-depth taking you through the process of drawing, inking, and watercolor. We'll get more into controlling water in the paper, water in the brush, and how you can use that to predict so that you get exactly the effect you want. And one of the tricks I'm going to show you is always have a paper towel. Always have a paper towel, something. These are Swedish towels, which is funny because I had somebody from Sweden going, we just call those towels. But it's, yeah, they can be rinsed and reused. You could use any. You could use a rag. For the longest time, I used those flour sack towels, and I would cut them up and then just wash them. They stain, but who cares? To pull out water from your brush, because I know this is going to have way too much, and I'm starting in the darkest area, again on the tip, and basically what I did, I'm kind of sketching out the shadow areas of the feathers. So, because I want to leave a white area, I literally am just using the tip of my brush to kind of lay in little lines, sometimes little V's, sometimes they look like, for lack of a better description, they look like an EKG line. Remember, we're in shadow here, but once we get right here, everything gets lighter. So I want to remember to stay away from that. So here goes my EKG line. And this, what you're doing is you're actually just putting in the shadow of one feather on top of another. So I'm kind of keeping in mind where my feathers are. We get more into shadow here again. So I'm kind of doing like these little V marks. It's a nice shadow area here. And then also connecting, if there's shadows that connect, I connect them. Now, if I don't blot out my brush, I can squeeze the water by twisting in my palette. Remember we had this, and so we get a darker line. So let's say that happens and you're like, oh, that's too much water. Blot, blot, blot. Take all the water out, twist it so you get a point, and your brush will always act like a sponge. You can just lift it. For the most part, you have some time. I'll show you another way this autumn to lift paint if you let it dry. Okay, so we are getting darker here because we are, remember, the light is coming here, so we're farther away from the light as he rounds off. So that's okay. That area is getting darker. Back here. And we are ending up. Just going to go ahead and put some of that shadow in here. Even though I'm looking at it, I'm thinking it's a different color. So I'm just looking at big feather shapes. I'm also staying in the direction of the feathers. Think of it the grain of the bird. You don't want, if the feathers are lying this way, you don't want to make them appear that they're lying in another way. Okay, so I'm seeing this feather area right here. Kind of leads right into there. And so a lot of the way we did the hash marks, okay, and he's getting some reflected light right here, so we're not going to do too much. Since I have less on my brush now, I feel confident doing a little bit of work right here, picking some up with my finger.